My name's Emily, and I'm 29. 2 days before my wedding, I found a note on my kitchen counter. My parents' words stared back in Mom's neat cursive "weddings off." "Expect a call from my lawyer." My dad's shaky initials were scrawled at the bottom. My stomach dropped. I sat on the floor rereading it, the silence deafening. Nathan, my fiancé, was at his bachelor party, clueless. I thought I knew my family, but this betrayal cut deep. Why would they do this? Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if this hits home, please like and subscribe to follow my story. The morning after I found the note, my apartment felt like a museum of what should have been. Ivory ribbons spilled from boxes and half-packed gift bags cluttered the living room. I was still Emily, 29, but the woman staring back in the mirror looked hollow. My phone sat silent on the kitchen table, no calls from Mom or Dad. I dialed Mom first, her number etched in my muscle memory. Straight to voicemail. Dad's phone did the same. My chest tightened, a mix of frustration and something heavier, like the air itself was pressing down. I grabbed my coffee mug, the one Nathan got me last Christmas with "World's Okayest Planner" scrawled on it, and tried to steady my hands. The note was still on the counter, folded now, but its words echoed in my head. I texted my sister Sarah, hoping she'd have answers. Her reply came fast, sharp. "Talk to Mom." That was it. No warmth, no explanation. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over her name. Sarah, who used to braid my hair and sneak me cookies past bedtime, was shutting me out. I sank into a chair, my eyes catching an old photo tucked under a stack of wedding programs. It was from Sarah's wedding 5 years ago, both of us in pale blue dresses laughing as Mom wiped happy tears. Dad had fumbled his speech that night, but his pride in us shone through. Now that memory felt like a lie. Had they been planning this all along? I shook my head, trying to push the thought away, but it clung like damp clothes. My phone buzzed, snapping me back. A text from Clara, my coworker, "Emergency meeting today. You're needed." Her words were clipped, almost smug. I frowned. Clara had been gunning for the same promotion I was, and with the wedding chaos, I'd barely thought about work. I typed a quick reply, saying I'd try, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed to know why my parents had turned my world upside down. I paced the apartment, the hardwood creaking under my bare feet. Nathan was still at his bachelor party, probably nursing a hangover with his cousins. I didn't want to burden him yet, not until I had something concrete. But the silence from my family was deafening. I opened my laptop, scrolling through old emails, hoping for a clue. Nothing. Just vendor confirmations and a florist's reminder about tomorrow's delivery. Tomorrow. The word felt like a stone in my throat. I grabbed the photo again, tracing Sarah's smile. She'd always been the golden child, the one who followed Mom's rules, married a guy Dad approved of. Was that it? Did they think Nathan wasn't good enough? They'd never said it outright, but I remembered Mom's tight smile when Nathan talked about his family's farm, or Dad's backhanded comments about small-town ambition. I'd brushed it off as their quirks, but now those moments felt like warnings I'd ignored. My phone buzzed again. "Clara, of course. Don't flake Emily." Big opportunity. I tossed the phone onto the couch, irritation flaring. Clara's timing was too perfect, like she could smell my vulnerability. I didn't need her drama on top of this. I needed my family to explain themselves. I needed to know why the people who raised me, who cheered at my graduations and framed my art projects, had stabbed me in the back. I stood, grabbing my keys. If Sarah wouldn't talk, I'd go to the source. My parents' house was an hour away, and I didn't care if they weren't expecting me. I deserved answers. As I slipped on my shoes, my eyes fell on the note again. Mom's cursive, Dad's initials. It wasn't just a message. It was a wall they'd built between us, and I was ready to tear it down. The drive to my parents' house felt like wading through fog, the highway stretching endlessly under a gray sky. I was Emily, 29, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened my mind, replaying Sarah's curt text, "Talk to Mom." My old sedan hummed along passing fields and faded billboards, but every mile tightened the knot in my stomach. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for a call, an apology, anything to break the silence. Nothing came. When I pulled into their driveway, the house looked wrong. Too still. The curtains were drawn, and Mom's prized rose bushes sat untouched, wilting in the late summer heat. I knocked, then rang the bell, my heart thudding. No answer. I fumbled with my spare key, half expecting it not to work, but the lock clicked open. Inside, the air was stale, like no one had been there in days. The living room was tidy, but a coffee mug sat abandoned on the side table, lipstick smudged on the rim. Mom's shade coral pink. I called out, my voice echoing in the quiet. Nothing. I wandered to Dad's study, a room I'd rarely entered growing up. His desk was cluttered with papers, a calculator, and a glass of half-drunk whiskey. My eyes landed on a small safe in the corner, its sleek black surface out of place among the worn bookshelves. We'd never had a safe before. I crouched down, tugging at the handle. Locked. My pulse quickened. What were they hiding? I stood scanning the room for clues when a shadow moved outside the window. I froze, then relaxed as Mrs. Larson, the neighbor, peered in, her face pinched. I stepped outside to meet her. She was in her gardening gloves, clutching a trowel, but her eyes darted away when I asked about my parents. "They left yesterday," she said in a hurry. "Packed bags and peeled out like they were running from something." She wouldn't look at me, just mumbled about watering her plants and shuffled off. My throat tightened. Running from what? From me. I went back inside the safe, taunting me from the corner. I didn't have the code, but its presence felt like a confession. They were keeping secrets, big ones. I pulled out my phone and called Nathan. His voice was warm, steady, but laced with worry when I told him about the empty house. He urged me to come home to let him help. I promised I would, but not yet. I needed to understand. As I drove back, the sky darkened, mirroring the churn in my chest. Clara's name flashed on my phone again, her voice sharp through the car's speakers. She needed me at work tomorrow. No excuses, she said. Her tone carried a smirk, like she knew I was crumbling and relished it. I hung up mid-sentence, my hands shaking. She was a vulture circling my chaos, but she was the least of my problems. Back at my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, the weight of the day pressing me into the cushions. I opened my email, scrolling mindlessly, when a new message caught my eye. It was from a law firm. I didn't recognize the subject line, "Cold and Stark Estate Dispute." My breath caught. The email was brief, scheduling a call for tomorrow morning with a Mr. Hayes. No details, just a time and a number. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. State dispute. Grandma Ruth's trust fund flashed in my mind, the one she'd set aside for my future. My parents had mentioned it vaguely, always with a smile, like it was a gift. Now it felt like a trap. I set the phone down, my hands cold. The safe, Mrs. Larson's evasiveness, Sarah's silence, and now this email. It was all connected, and I was standing on the edge of something I didn't want to see. My family wasn't just pulling away. They were building a case against me, and I was about to find out why. The night before what was supposed to be my wedding day, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my plans. I'm Emily, 29, and my hands trembled as I dialed the number from the lawyer's email. Mr. Hayes picked up, his voice crisp, like he was reading from a script. He didn't waste time. My parents were contesting Grandma Ruth's trust fund, the one meant for my wedding and my future. Their claim I was unfit to manage it. The words landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. I gripped the phone, my nails digging into my palm. Unfit, I'd spent years proving myself working late nights at the marketing firm, saving every penny for this wedding. I asked Hayes what they meant, my voice cracking. He was vague, mentioning concerns about my judgment, my choices. I pressed harder, but he said we'd discuss details in person tomorrow. He hung up, leaving me with a dial tone and a racing heart. I stood pacing the small living room, my bare feet catching on a stray ribbon from the gift bags. My eyes landed on a box of wedding supplies half open in the corner. I rummaged through it, desperate for something to ground me, and found Grandma Ruth's old journal, its leather cover worn soft. I flipped it open, and a loose page fell out, her familiar handwriting staring up at me. "Emily, you're my legacy," it read, dated a month before she passed. My throat tightened. Grandma had believed in me, seen something my parents apparently didn't. I sank onto the couch, the journal clutched to my chest. My parents had sat across from me at countless dinners, smiling as I talked about Nathan, about our plans. Had it all been an act? I grabbed my phone and called Sarah again, my fingers shaking. She answered this time, her voice low, like she was hiding from someone. I didn't let her dodge. I told her about the lawyer, the trust, their claim I was unfit. There was a long pause, then she sighed. "Mom thinks Nathan's beneath you," she said, like it was obvious. She's been saying it for months. My breath caught anger flaring hot in my chest. Beneath me, Nathan, who'd worked 2 jobs to help his mom keep their farm, who'd spent hours helping me plan this wedding, was beneath me. I asked Sarah why she never told me why she let Mom poison everything. She mumbled something about family loyalty, but it sounded hollow. I hung up my hands, shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Sarah had known and said nothing. My own sister. I stood, my eyes burning, and caught my reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked like a stranger, her face tight with betrayal. I thought of Mom's coral lipstick on that mug, Dad's whiskey glass, the locked safe. They weren't just controlling. They were dismantling my life piece by piece. I texted Nathan, needing his voice, but he was at the venue handling last-minute details. His reply was quick. "Call me when you're ready. I love you." But even his words felt distant, like they couldn't reach me through the fog of my anger. Clara's name flashed on my phone next, her text smug. "Heard you're skipping work tomorrow. Bad move." I deleted it, my jaw tight. She was circling, waiting for me to fall, but I didn't have the energy to care. My family's betrayal was a blade, and every new detail twisted it deeper. I sat back down, Grandma's journal still in my lap, and flipped through its pages. Her words were steady, full of love, but they couldn't drown out the truth. My parents didn't just doubt me. They were trying to erase me. I drove to Sarah's house, the city lights blurring past my windshield. "I'm Emily, 29, and the weight of her words, "Mom thinks Nathan's beneath you," burned in my chest like a coal. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the leather creaking under my fingers. I needed to see her face to understand how my sister could stand by while our parents tore my life apart. The radio played some upbeat pop song, and I slammed it off, the silence matching the churn in my gut. Sarah's house was a neat 2-story, glowing warmly against the night. I parked crookedly and marched to the door, my breath shallow. She opened it before I could knock. Her face pale, her hair pulled back tightly. She didn't invite me in, just stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. I didn't wait for pleasantries. I asked why she was defending Mom, why she thought it was okay to let them claim I was unfit for Grandma's trust. Her eyes flicked to the ground, then back to me, sharp and cold. "It's not about Nathan," she said, her voice low. "It's about stability. The trust was for the family, not your whims." I froze, the word whims cutting deeper than I expected. My wedding, my future with Nathan was a whim. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. I asked what she meant, demanded she explain. She sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Mom and Dad need that money, she said. Dad's business collapsed last year. They're drowning in debt. You wouldn't understand. I laughed, bitter and hollow. Wouldn't understand I'd spent years watching Dad's late nights, Mom's forced smiles when creditors called. I'd offered to help, but they always waved me off saying they were fine. Now they were stealing from me to fix their mistakes. I told Sarah that my words spilling out like water from a broken dam. She flinched, but didn't back down. You're selfish, she said, her voice rising. You think you're above us, running off with some farm boy, ignoring what this family needs. My chest heaved, anger and hurt tangling so tightly I could barely breathe. I asked how she could say that, how she could stand there and twist everything I'd built into something shameful. She looked away, her jaw tight, and that's when I saw Lily, her toddler, peeking through the window. She held up a crayon drawing a stick figure family under a bright sun. Mom, Dad, Lily, Sarah. No me. The innocence of it gutted me like I'd already been erased. I turned back to Sarah, my voice low now, raw. I asked if she really believed I was the problem, if she thought I deserved this. She didn't answer, just opened the door to go back inside. I grabbed her arm, desperate. Tell me, I said. She pulled away, her eyes hard. You made your choices, Emily. Now we're making ours. The door clicked shut, and I stood there, the porch light buzzing above me, my world shrinking to the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stumbled back to my car, my legs heavy. Nathan texted asking if I was okay, saying he was at the venue waiting for me. I couldn't reply, not yet. The truth was sinking in, cold and relentless. My parents weren't just controlling. They were desperate, greedy, willing to sacrifice me to save themselves. And Sarah, my sister, my confidant, was their ally. I started the engine, my hands shaking, and drove into the night, the road ahead, as uncertain as the ache in my heart. Nathan's suggestion to cancel the wedding echoed in my mind, his voice soft but defeated. Maybe they're right about me. The morning of what should have been my wedding day, I sat in a sterile law office, the air thick with the smell of coffee and old paper. I'm Emily, 29, and my hands were clammy as I faced Mr. Hayes across a polished desk. His suit was crisp, his expression unreadable, but the folder in front of him held my family's secrets. I'd barely slept Sarah's words, "You're selfish," looping in my head like a broken record. Nathan was at the venue, texting me updates, his messages, a lifeline I clung to. Hayes opened the folder and slid a document toward me, his voice flat. Your parents submitted this codicil to your grandmother's trust, he said. It redirects the funds to them, effective immediately. I stared at the paper, my eyes catching Dad's signature at the bottom, jagged and uneven, just like the initials on the note they'd left. My stomach twisted. I asked how they could do this, my voice barely above a whisper. Hayes leaned back, his fingers steepled. They claim you've shown poor judgment, he said. Specifically, your engagement to Nathan. My breath hitched, the room tilting. Poor judgment. Nathan, who'd spent months saving for my ring, who'd laughed with me over late-night pizza, was poor judgment. I asked Hayes to explain my words sharp now. He flipped to another page, revealing a notarized statement. My parents had written that I was reckless, unstable, unfit to inherit Grandma Ruth's legacy. The words blurred as my eyes burned, not with tears, but with a rage I hadn't known I could feel. I asked if the codicil was legal, my voice trembling. Hayes hesitated, then pointed to a discrepancy in the dates. The document was signed after Grandma's death, he said. which raises questions. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Questions like, what? He met my gaze, his tone measured. Forgery, potentially. We're investigating, but the signature patterns suggest your father's involvement. I froze, the word forgery slicing through me. Dad, who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cried when I moved out, had forged a legal document to steal from me. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, dialing Mom's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped. I didn't let her speak. I told her about the codicil, the forgery, Hayes' suspicions. There was a long silence, then she said, "You forced our hand, Emily. You chose that boy over us." The line went dead, and I sat there, the phone hot against my ear, her words echoing. Forced their hand. I'd chosen love, a future, and they'd chosen betrayal. I stood my legs unsteady and thanked Hayes, promising to follow up. As I left the office, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Guests are arriving. What do we do? My chest tightened. The venue was an hour away, filled with people expecting a celebration, oblivious to the war my family had started. I got in my car, the engine's hum drowning out the chaos in my head, and drove toward the venue. I didn't know what I'd say to Nathan, to the guests, but I knew one thing: my parents hadn't just doubted me. They'd tried to erase my future, and I was standing on the edge of losing everything. I pulled into the venue parking lot, the fairy lights twinkling against the dusk like nothing was wrong. I'm Emily, 29, and my hands were still shaking from Mom's words on the phone. You forced our hand. The barn doors were open, laughter and music spilling out, guests milling around with champagne flutes. I spotted Nathan near the entrance, his tie loose, his face tight with worry. He waved me over, but before I could reach him, I saw Sarah inside chatting with our cousin Hannah, her smile practiced and perfect. I stepped into the barn, the smell of roses and cedar hitting me like a memory I didn't want. Sarah's eyes met mine, and her smile faltered, but she turned back to Hannah, her voice low. I caught fragments of her words. Emily's reckless, always chasing dreams. No wonder they're worried. My blood ran cold. I pushed through the crowd, my dress catching on a chair, and stopped in front of her. The chatter around us faded, eyes turning our way. I asked Sarah what she meant, my voice loud enough to carry. She froze, her glass trembling in her hand. Hannah stepped back, looking uneasy. Sarah tried to laugh it off, saying I was overreacting, but I didn't let her. I said I heard her calling me reckless, siding with Mom and Dad while they forged documents to steal my future. The room went quiet, the string quartet pausing mid-note. Sarah's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she snapped, "You think you're so perfect, Emily, but you're tearing this family apart." The words hit like a public flogging, every guest a witness. I asked why she was doing this, my voice breaking, begging for something real. She stepped closer, her eyes hard. "Because you never listen," she said. "You pick him over us, and now you're dragging us all down with you." She gestured toward Nathan, who stood frozen by the bar, his face a mask of hurt. I turned, seeing aunts, uncles, friends, their faces a mix of shock and pity, whispering to each other. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through. "Clara!" My coworker stood by the dessert table, uninvited, her smirk sharp as a blade. "Rough day, huh?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Heard you're skipping work to deal with family drama." "Smart move." Her words were venom dripping with glee, and I realized she'd come to watch me burn. The room spun, Sarah's betrayal, Clara's cruelty, the guests' stares all pressing in, suffocating me. I looked at Nathan, his eyes pleading, but I couldn't move. Sarah stormed out, brushing past me, her perfume lingering like a slap. The crowd parted, their murmurs growing louder, dissecting my pain. Clara slipped away, her laughter echoing. I stood alone in the center of the barn, the weight of every eye on me, my family's lies exposed, my heart shattered. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted, and all I could feel was the hollow ache of being utterly, completely betrayed. The day after the wedding, that never happened. I woke up on my couch, the apartment dim with morning light filtering through half-closed blinds. I'm Emily, 29, and the sting of Sarah's words, Clara's smirk, and the guests' stares still burned in my chest. My phone was a graveyard of notifications, but I ignored it. My eyes fixed on a single text from Tessa, my childhood friend. I'm here when you're ready. Her loyalty was a spark in the ashes of last night's humiliation. I stood, my legs stiff, and caught sight of Nathan's jacket draped over a chair. He'd stayed until dawn, holding me as I unraveled, promising we'd figure this out. His faith in us steadied me, but the weight of my family's betrayal, Mom's cold accusation, Dad's forged signature, Sarah's public attack threatened to pull me under. I couldn't let it. Not anymore. I grabbed my laptop and searched for a lawyer, someone who wasn't Hayes, someone who'd fight for me. I found Rachel Carter, a name that popped up with reviews praising her tenacity. I dialed her number, my heart pounding. Rachel's voice was warm but direct, like she'd seen cases like mine before. I told her everything, the note, the codicil, the forgery, my parents' claim I was unfit. She listened, asking sharp questions about dates, signatures, and Grandma Ruth's trust. When I mentioned the safe in Dad's study, her tone shifted urgent. We need to freeze that trust account now, she said. If they're moving funds, we can stop them. I agreed, my voice steady for the first time in days. She promised to file an emergency motion by noon. Hanging up, I felt a flicker of control, like I was finally gripping the reins of my own life. I texted Tessa, asking her to meet me at a coffee shop. She was there in 20 minutes, her curly hair wild, her eyes fierce with support. Over lattes, I spilled the plan Rachel, the trust, the freeze. Tessa grinned, saying she knew I had fight in me. She'd overheard Sarah at the venue whispering about my independence, her jealousy plain. It hurt, but it fueled me. Sarah didn't get to define me. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the voicemails from Mom, 5 now, each one angrier than the last. I blocked her number, a small act that felt like cutting a chain. Tessa watched, nodding. "You're doing this," she said. I nodded back, my jaw tight. I was done being their pawn. Rachel emailed confirming the trust account was frozen pending a court review. My parents couldn't touch it now. The relief was sharp, but it came with a new fear they'd know I was fighting back. I leaned back in the booth, Tessa's hand on mine, and felt something shift inside me. The girl who'd stood frozen in that barn swallowing Sarah's venom was gone. I was Emily, and I was claiming my voice. Nathan texted asking to meet, saying he was sorry for doubting us last night. I smiled, typing a reply. We were in this together, and I was ready to show my family what I was made of. Oh. I left the coffee shop with Tessa's words echoing in my head, her faith in me, like a pulse I could lean into. I'm Emily, 29, and the drive to a small cafe across town felt like crossing a bridge I'd never dared to before. Rachel had arranged a meeting with my parents, a neutral ground to lay everything bare. Nathan offered to come, but I asked him to wait, needing to face this alone. My hands were steady now, the fear still there, but quieter, like a shadow I could outrun. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat, its windows fogged from the late summer heat. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the door. Rachel sat beside me, her briefcase open, papers neatly stacked. She handed me a letter, one she'd found in the trust's original files, written by Grandma Ruth. My dearest Emily, it began, "Your heart is your strength. Don't let anyone dim it." I traced the ink, her cursive bold and sure. and felt her presence like a hand on my shoulder. The bell above the door jingled, and Mom and Dad walked in their faces tight. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed. Her blouse wrinkled a far cry from her usual polish. Dad's shoulders slumped, his hands fidgeting with his watch. They sat across from us, the table a chasm. Rachel started, her voice calm but firm, outlining the frozen trust account and the evidence of their forged codicil. Mom's jaw tightened, but Dad's eyes dropped to the table, his fingers still. I took a breath, my voice low but clear. I told them I knew about the forgery, the safe, their claim I was unfit. I said their note had broken something in me, but I wasn't the one tearing our family apart. They were. Mom's eyes flashed, and she leaned forward, her voice sharp. You don't understand, Emily. We were protecting you, saving you from a mistake. I cut her off, my words steady. Nathan's not a mistake. Your lies are. Dad spoke, then his voice cracked, barely audible. He admitted his business debts had spiraled, creditors circling like wolves. The trust was their lifeline, he said, their only way out. His hands shook, and for a moment I saw the man who'd carried me on his shoulders at county fairs. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd betrayed me to save himself. I asked why they didn't trust me, why they chose deceit over honesty. Mom looked away, her silence louder than any answer. Rachel laid out the next steps, a court hearing, potential charges if the forgery held up. Dad's face crumpled, but Mom stayed rigid, her lips a thin line. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and said I was done letting them control me. I'd fight for the trust for my future, because Grandma Ruth believed I could. They didn't respond, their eyes fixed somewhere beyond me. I walked out, Rachel behind me, the cafe door swinging shut with a soft thud. Outside, the air was warm, the street alive with evening bustle. I stopped, my breath steady, and felt the weight of Grandma's letter in my pocket. Tessa texted asking how it went, and I smiled, typing a quick reply. I was still standing, still fighting. Back at my apartment, I found Nathan waiting, his arms open. I stepped into them, my resolve like a quiet flame. I looked at him, my voice soft but sure, and said, "Freeze the account. That money's disputed." He nodded, his eyes proud, and I knew I'd finally claimed my own story. 2 weeks after I froze the trust account, my apartment felt like a quiet fortress, a place where I could breathe again. I'm Emily, 29, and the silence was new, no longer heavy, but expectant, like the pause before a storm clears. Nathan was at my side, his presence steady as we sorted through the aftermath of my stand. The coffee table held a single letter from Rachel, my lawyer confirming the court had invalidated my parents' forged codicil. The trust was mine again, but the victory tasted bittersweet, sharp with the cost. I sat on the floor, a mug of tea cooling in my hands, and read Rachel's update again. The judge had ruled swiftly, citing clear evidence of fraud. My parents faced potential charges, though Rachel noted they could settle out of court. I set the letter down, my fingers tracing the edge of the paper. I'd won, but the word felt hollow. My family wasn't a prize to claim. It was a wound that hadn't closed. The doorbell buzzed, startling me. I opened it to find a small package, no return address, just my name in careful script. Inside was a childhood scrapbook. Its pages yellowed, filled with photos of me and Sarah, building sandcastles, blowing out birthday candles, her arm always around me. Tucked in the back was a note in Sarah's handwriting. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't know how to stop her. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with a pang of something softer, more fragile. Sarah's apology was a crack in the wall between us, but I wasn't ready to step through. I set the scrapbook on the shelf, its weight lingering in my hands. Nathan watched, his eyes gentle, and asked if I wanted to talk. I shook my head, not because I didn't trust him, but because the words weren't there yet. Instead, I went to work, needing the rhythm of routine. The office was different now, quieter since I'd confronted Clara. I'd caught her in the break room, her gossip about my absence spreading like wildfire. I laid out her lies calm but firm in front of our boss. She'd been demoted, her desk moved to a corner, and the whispers about me had stopped. My colleagues nodded as I passed their respect a small, hard-won thing. I sat at my desk, a new project waiting, and felt the shift. I wasn't the woman who'd crumbled under Clara's barbs or Sarah's betrayal. I was Emily, and my choices had redrawn the lines around me. But as I opened my laptop, a voicemail from Mom popped up, slipped through before I'd blocked her again. Her voice was low, strained. "We need to talk, Emily. You've gone too far." I deleted it, my pulse steady, but her words hung in the air, a reminder that my fight wasn't over. I leaned back, the office hum, fading, and stared at the ceiling. Sarah's scrapbook, Mom's voicemail, the court's ruling, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I'd taken back the trust, my future, but the cost was a family fractured, their faces unfamiliar now. The thought settled in my chest, heavy and cold, like a stone I couldn't shift. I left the office early, the late summer air heavy, as I walked to a small diner to meet Sarah. I'm Emily, 29, and the scrapbook she'd sent sat like a question I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. The diner was half empty, its vinyl booths cracked, the jukebox humming a soft country tune. Sarah was already there, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. I slid into the booth across from her, my posture stiff, my words held back. She spoke first, her voice low, saying she'd been wrong to follow Mom's lead. She said Mom had painted me as reckless, a threat to the family's stability, and she'd believed it, caught in the pressure of keeping everyone together. I listened, my fingers tracing the edge of the table, the wood worn smooth. I asked why she didn't warn me, why she let me walk into their trap. Her eyes dropped, and she admitted she was scared, afraid of losing Mom's approval. It was the first time I saw her not as my big sister, but as someone smaller caught in her own chains. I leaned back, the booth creaking, and told her about the court, the frozen trust, the forgery. Her face paled, her hands tightening around the mug. She hadn't known about the codicil, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I believed her, but it didn't erase the sting of her standing against me at the venue, her words cutting me in front of everyone. I said that, my tone even, and she nodded, her eyes wet, but not spilling over. "I'm trying, Emily," she said. "I want us back." The words hung there fragile, and I didn't know how to catch them. I thought of Nathan, who'd urged me to cut ties with my parents, his voice firm but pained. He saw them as anchors dragging me down, but Sarah was different, a thread I wasn't ready to sever. I told her we could try, but it would take time, my words careful, like stepping on thin ice. She nodded again, her face a mix of relief and guilt, and we sat in silence, the jukebox filling the space between us. Later, Tessa invited me to a community event, a small gathering at a local park, where people shared stories of fractured families. I went, standing under string lights as strangers spoke of estrangement, forgiveness, regret. A woman named June talked about her father, how his silence after a fight had carved a hole she still felt. Her story mirrored mine, and I felt seen, my pain less lonely. I thanked Tessa after, her arm around my shoulders, her laughter a balm. Back home, I found another voicemail, this time from Mom, her tone softer, asking to meet, saying we needed to fix this. I sat on my bed, the phone cold in my hand, and played it again. Her voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't sorry either. It was a plea, and it landed like a stone in still water, rippling through me. I didn't call back. I set the phone down, my breath slow, and stared at the ceiling. The trust was mine, Sarah was reaching out, but Mom's voice reminded me of the cost. My family was a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was too tired to search for them tonight. A month after the trust was secured, I found myself in a park near my apartment, the late summer air cool against my skin. I'm Emily, 29, and the world felt softer today, the edges of my anger smoothed by time. I sat on a bench, a notebook open in my lap, its pages filling with thoughts I hadn't dared to voice before. The trees rustled their leaves, a mix of green and early gold, and I wrote about the woman I was becoming, someone who'd learned to stand tall in her own story. I'd been carrying Grandma Ruth's letter in my pocket, its words a quiet anchor. This morning, I drove to her grave, a small plot under an oak tree, the stone worn but warm in the sunlight. I knelt, brushing dirt from the edges, and spoke to her, my voice steady. I thanked her for the trust, for seeing me when my own parents couldn't. I told her I was trying to honor her faith, to build a life that mattered. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of cut grass, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in months. My pen moved across the notebook, capturing the shift. I wrote about Nathan, how his patience had held me through the storm, and about Tessa, whose fierce loyalty reminded me I wasn't alone. I even wrote about Sarah, her apology still a fragile thread, when I wasn't sure I could weave back into my life. The act of writing felt like untangling knots, each word a step toward clarity. I paused, watching a jogger pass, her ponytail bouncing, and realized I was no longer the woman who'd stood frozen in that barn, drowning in betrayal. My phone buzzed, a reminder of tomorrow's meeting with Mom. The thought tightened my chest, but not like before. I wasn't afraid of her anymore, not her words or her silence. I'd set boundaries, drawn lines, and the Emily who'd begged for answers was gone. I closed the notebook, my fingers lingering on its cover, and stood stretching in the sunlight. A butterfly landed on the bench, its wings a delicate blue, and I watched it, my breath slowing. It felt like a sign, not of magic, but of something simple. I was still here, still growing. I walked back to my car, the park's quiet hum fading behind me. Nathan had texted, planning a small vow renewal for us, just close friends, no pressure. The idea warmed me, a promise we'd make on our terms. I replied, saying I was in, and slipped the phone into my pocket. The butterfly was gone when I glanced back, but its brief presence lingered, a reminder that change didn't always shout. Sometimes it just landed soft and sure, and you carried it forward. I drove to a quiet bookstore cafe that evening, the kind with mismatched chairs and shelves that smelled of old pages. I'm Emily, 29, and the weight of tomorrow's meeting with Mom felt like a stone in my pocket, steady but not crushing. Tessa had asked to meet, sensing I needed grounding before facing Mom. She was at a corner table, her smile warm, a cup of chamomile tea waiting for me. I sat, the steam curling between us, and felt the world slow. Tessa didn't push, just asked how I was holding up. I told her about the park, the butterfly, the way writing had started to feel like breathing. She nodded, then shared her own story, one she'd kept close. Her dad had walked out when she was a kid, leaving a hole she'd spent years filling with anger. Forgiveness, she said, wasn't about him. It was about freeing herself. Her words landed softly like leaves on water, and I saw my own path clearer. I didn't need Mom to be sorry. I needed to let go for me. I sipped the tea, its warmth spreading, and thought of Sarah's scrapbook still untouched on my shelf. I told Tessa I wasn't sure I could forgive, not yet, but I wanted to try. She squeezed my hand, saying that was enough for now. We sat in comfortable silence, the cafe's hum, a gentle backdrop, and I felt a shift, like a door creaking open inside me. I wasn't whole, but I was enough. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Mom's nervous about tomorrow. Don't go too hard on her. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering. Sarah's warning stirred a flicker of doubt, but I set the phone down, choosing not to reply. I'd face Mom with my truth, not Sarah's caution. Tessa caught my eye, her nod a quiet affirmation, and I smiled, small but real. The cafe's lights dimmed as closing time neared, and we stepped outside, the night air crisp. Before driving home, I stopped by my mailbox, finding an old voicemail from Dad saved by some glitch. I played it, his voice rough, not with anger, but with something broken. He didn't apologize, just said my name like a question he couldn't answer. I deleted it, my finger steady, and stood in the dark, the stars faint above. At work, I'd been offered Clara's old role, a nod to my resilience, but it was this moment alone, choosing to release Dad's voice, that felt like my true victory. I got in my car, the engine's hum soft, and drove toward tomorrow, my heart calm, my steps sure. The diner was quiet that morning, its windows streaked with early light, the smell of bacon and coffee grounding me. I'm Emily, 29, and I sat across from Mom, my hands folded on the table, Nathan waiting outside in the car. Mom's face was softer than I'd expected, her eyes tired, like she'd been carrying her own kind of weight. I'd come to say my piece, not to fight, and the calm in my chest felt like a new muscle, one I'd built through every hard choice. She spoke first, her voice low, saying she'd been scared not of me, but of losing control, of watching our family fray. She admitted the codicil was a mistake, born of desperation, not malice. Her words weren't an apology, not fully, but they were honest, and that was more than I'd hoped for. I listened, my finger steady, and when she paused, I told her how her note had shattered me, how it made me question every memory we'd shared. I said I'd needed her to trust me, not to rewrite my future. Mom's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small locket, its silver tarnished but warm, from her hand. It was Grandma Ruth's, one I'd thought lost years ago, a piece of her I'd loved as a child. Mom said she'd found it cleaning out the attic, and it felt right to give it to me now. I took it, my thumb tracing its worn edges, and felt a thread of connection, not to Mom, but to the woman who'd raised me to be strong. I told her I could forgive, but our relationship would be different, built on boundaries, not assumptions. I said I was choosing my life with Nathan, with the trust, with the pieces I'd fought for. Mom nodded, her lips tight, and I saw something shift in her, a flicker of respect maybe, or just acceptance. We didn't hug, didn't cry, but the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was just there, like the space between two people trying to find their way. I stood, slipping the locket into my pocket, and walked out, the diner's bell jingling softly. Nathan was leaning against the car, his smile small but real, and I leaned into him, my breath slow. The morning was cool, the street waking up, and I felt the locket's weight against my hip, a reminder of what I'd carried and what I'd let go. I wasn't fixed, not whole, but I was enough, and that was a start. A week after the diner, I stood in a small garden behind Tessa's house, fairy lights strung above the evening air, soft with the scent of lavender. I'm Emily, 29, and Nathan was beside me, his hand warm in mine, as we exchanged quiet vows in front of Tessa, a few friends, and unexpectedly, Sarah. She'd shown up hesitant, but present, her smile tentative as she hugged me after. It wasn't a grand wedding, just us, real and unscripted, and that made it ours. Back home, I started a new habit, waking early to sit by my window, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the city stir. I'd think about Mom, Dad, the trust, the pain, and let it settle, not as a weight, but as a story I'd lived through. I wrote letters to Grandma Ruth, not to send, but to keep thanking her for the strength she'd seen in me. I'd slip the locket on some days, its cool metal, a reminder of what I'd fought for, not just the money, but my right to choose my life. Sarah and I were meeting for coffee, talking about small things like her daughter's new obsession with painting. It wasn't the sisterhood we'd had not yet, but it was a start, built on honesty, not expectation. Dad hadn't reached out, and I hadn't either, but I left the door open a crack for someday. Work was steady, my new role a quiet triumph, and Clara's name faded a footnote in a chapter I'd closed. The lesson came to me slowly in those morning silences as the coffee steamed and the world woke. I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't about winning or being right. It's about claiming your space, your voice, even when it shakes. It's about forgiving not for them, but for the freedom it gives you. Family isn't a contract or a cage. It's a choice, one you make every day with boundaries, with love, with the courage to let go when it's needed. I'm still learning, still growing, but I'm not afraid of the work. I look at Nathan, at the life we're building, and know it's worth it. The locket rests in a drawer now, not forgotten, but not needed every day. I carry its truth in me, the truth that I'm enough, always have been. What's a moment you've had to choose yourself to draw a line or let one go? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this journey resonated, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to new mornings, and to finding our way one step at a time.